Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to a Better Life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, and here with me is my co-host, Jussara Korngold, who is the Secretary General of the International Spiritist Council and former President and current Vice President of the United States Spiritist Federation. Thank you for joining us today. Today's episode is going to focus on aspects of forgiveness, aspects of forgetfulness, and we have a really interesting discussion, right, Jussara, to talk about those topics in ways that they can be quite broad or quite precise to your thoughts about this. But if you are interested in learning more about what we do, please go to www.spiritist.us for more information. And please note that this program, Psychology and Spirituality, is sponsored by AMI Brazil, the United States Spiritist Federation, the TV Mansão do Caminho, and the International Spiritist Council. If you have any questions, we invite you to please type them, put your feedback, your thoughts in the chat window. If we don't have time today, we'll come back to them at a later episode. Also, take a moment to hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. But with that, I want to say hello, Jussara. So good to see you. And it's so good to have you back this week where we talk about these topics, right? And I'm talking about plural, forgiveness and forgetfulness. But how about we start talking, Jussara?
Absolutely. So let me first greet you, Marcia, and also everyone. It's really a joy moment when we can share those thoughts, reflections with all of you. And the subject today, I think it's so pertinent to all of us in so many aspects. Not only on our personal life, but of course in professional life and any kind of a relationship that we have, because it means that somehow we have to accept, understand, and forgive everyone's wrong actions in a way, because we are all doing the same things. We are none of us are perfect, and we all are committing mistakes. And in terms of forgiveness, I think as Joanna de Angelis says, because we are going to base our study today on this book, Wake Up and Be Happy, from the psychological series of Joanna de Angelis, psychographed by Divaldo Pereira Franco and published by Leal Publisher. We are going to focus on chapter 19, where Joanna de Angelis comes and talks exactly about that, about the need to forgive, the need to forget, and how this can actually contribute for our mental balance. So here in this episode and in this program, actually, podcast that we are talking about psychology and spirituality, the psychology aspect of all of this is how this impacts our mental health. How can this bring harmony to us? And in a way, of course, is going to help us to have a happier life. Because when I'm not holding grudges, when I'm not just giving myself to resentment, or even when I'm not expecting perfection from others, perfection that I myself am not able to give, right? Because I don't have it. And from what we know, it's going to be a while until we reach that stage. So this is basically what we are going to be discussing now. I don't know if Marcia would like to say something before you continue.
Yes, I would like to just bring us a thought, and this is really, I would say, almost like Pollyanna, that the everything is beautiful, everything is good. But I'm going to say it anyways, Jussara. I just wanted to say that whenever we practice this very idealized thing that is called love, which is a byproduct of forgiving and forgetting, right? It's this love. When we practice that in everything we do, we're able to really, as Jussara said, live better, live in a much more balanced life. And I would just say, Jussara, if I imagine my, I don't know, my day today, right? If I think of everything that I do, and I love the expression, right? That if we think and speak with love, right? It's not just an idea, but we start to become very practical and tactical in doing, in being love. So we speak, we think with love. We are then predisposed to be kind, to understand those that are called our adversaries, our opponents, our enemies, right? So this is the platform, the way, the jumping ground for us to really get to be better, not only with ourselves, but all of those around us. That's just a thought that I thought. But anyways, go ahead and let's talk about the topic.
I was thinking that before we start, just not to have any kind of a misunderstanding, because when we were talking about forgiving and forgiving everyone and forgiving the actions, we do understand that we're not there yet. And I would like to bring to the discussion as well the teachings from Jesus, that when he said, love one another, and then he said, love your enemies. And when we are talking about loving one another, learning to love one another, because this is the way that we will be, showing our progress, our spiritual progress. When we study and we go deeper in the statement of loving one enemies in the gospel according to Spiritism, it's very clear in saying, of course, you're not going to love them the same way that you love your loved ones, right? But at least try not to wish them bad. So this is the case of sometimes, we know that there are certain things that will be very difficult for every one of us to forgive, certain actions that human beings are capable of doing, that not only we are not going to forgive, but we are not going to forget at the moment. So please, I just I wanted to clarify that, not to, because as you were saying, being in the world of fantasy or Pollyanna, just thinking, oh, I have to love everyone. No, we will have difficulties in our relationships. There will always be that person, and you're lucky if you just have one, right? In your way, that you say, oh my God, that is that person. It always show me my evil side, so to say, my negative side, because it's when you feel that you still harbor negative emotions. Right. So I just wanted to clarify before we continue with the topic. And I would like to start by reading the first paragraph here from the Joanna de Angelis, when she says, people who have been hurt or have suffered often say, it is not difficult for me to forgive. However, it would be nearly impossible for me to forget. So only that statement, it leads us to reflect about the words, about the meaning of those words, what it is to forgive. It is really to remove any negative sentiments from your heart. But we cannot remove from our minds experiences that we have lived. But in a way, the difference here is, although we will never forget, or at least while we are in our good ages, right? We are not going to forget anything. It doesn't mean that we are going to pay that much attention or give too much value to that. Okay, it was something bad, a bad experience that you had in your past, but you're not going to stay there, because it's important for us to live in the moment and not let the past take over our day-to-day lives. So this is the difference here. No one is required to forget and to pretend that I don't even remember that. Of course we do. But then the forgiveness is a different thing. The forgiveness is actually us making an effort to understand human beings, human circumstances, and even and especially the need that we have to remove those negative traits from ourselves.
There is also something, Jussara, because it's such a very insightful and at the same time very, very true, very real, very day-to-day real, right? We all go through this, and like Joanna and you mentioned here, I can forgive so and so. I will never forget. And she's saying it's okay not to forget, right? But how do you go back to a point that I call it perhaps equilibrium, a point where you go back to the original state before whatever led to the sense of discomfort, of hurt, or a sense of a betrayal, whatever that may be. So the thought that came to my mind as you were speaking, Jussara, was the fact that in addition to living in a quite complex world, because we live in a densely populated world, right? Our ecosystem, if you will, of individuals that come to us and hurt us, even when they don't mean to. I think you mentioned that already. But Joanna mentioned something that I love to perhaps bring it up as an added wrinkle to this conversation. In addition to the two people, right? The two people that one hurts and the other gets hurt, there's also an idea behind all of this that Joanna calls the archetypical inheritances. Ooh, big words, right? Archetypical inheritance. What we, society at large, are inherited, and this becomes part of our unconscious, and even without knowing, right, consciously knowing, something becomes part of my belief system, and I act upon it, and that may be the source of hurt to the other. Simple example. Let's say a family with two boys, two girls, and because of perhaps that inheritance of a patriarchal society still exists and impacts that family, there is preferential perhaps treatment for the boys versus the girls, and that hurts that spirit, that person, that psychological well-being of that person who's the girl, and the mom and the dad, they have no clue that they're hurting. So it's just a simple put, it's just a wrinkle, right, Jussara, beyond the fact that how to forgive, how to forget, how to become able to love again. There's the sense of once we all are aware of all this underneath the surface, and we're able to be more mature, psychologically speaking, to better understand the actions of the other, it frees us to become better and more able, perhaps, to deal with all those inputs, outputs from individuals. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's right. Right, is we're talking about behaviors and beliefs, All right. And so this set of beliefs that we receive that perhaps, one ethnicity is better than other. Why? Right. Or because you are in a certain position, you are smarter than another person, or because, you are, let's say, someone that works in a home, like house cleaning, and then she replies to you, she says something to you, and you think it's unforgivable because they are not in the position of even talking to you. All those things that we learn, right? And thank God we are getting rid of all of this. Habits are changing, and of course, it's easier for us first to work on the surface, like for instance, now most of the places, at least here in the US, you cannot smoke inside, right? But before it was something that no one would condemn, and now, of course, if you do that, you are going to be invited to leave, but everyone will look at you with a different view, which is excellent. It's a progress, but those values we are changing because they are all outward changes. But what we have to think about is about the inward. How am I going to change in my line of thinking, the set of knowledge that we have received? Or you mentioned, the way of, raising children as well, and how this impact in our judgment of people as well. But it's interesting because then Joanna de Angelis says, if we do not entirely forget the offense, there is no real forgiveness. Oh, okay. Right. Now, she's asking us to go an extra step. But the forget here, like when we were talking about before, is not to go to a brainwash or hypnosis session to remove this memory from my mind, from my brain, right? It's really that it becomes so unimportant that is almost like really we forget because it's no longer important. Right. Sometimes I see, especially when my son was younger, and, there was a certain kind of competition on, how early your child learn how to read and write, or to do this or that. At the end, everyone is going to learn, right, how to read and write. And after one point, whether you struggled more or less, it's going to become completely unimportant, because everyone will get in the same way. It will get in the same the same result, that is, learning how to read and write. Yeah.
And I would even add another example with children, because you said at some point it becomes unimportant. In your case, so your example was the result, right? The result, the outcome is what's important, not the process. Or we don't have key performance indicators for raising our children, right? Or being kind. We don't work like that. But the other thing that came to my mind was similarly in a different way yet, is when a child comes to you and says, oh, I hate you. And we're talking about 3 or 4-year-old mother, I hate you. You're so mean. And you look, and you're the mature one, and you let it be, right? It's unimportant, that expression of anger, frustration, etc., of a child, because the child is just a child. So I think that's also good for us to see, when do we become really spiritually mature, emotionally mature, psychologically mature? We start to see things that perhaps previously would bother us. And at some point, you just go, okay, whatever, let's move on, right?
And you see, in a way, it doesn't make sense because for us to keep those memories or to keep on feeding them, because they require an enormous amount of emotional energy on our part. There is a book by, let me look at here. Oops. Sorry. Olivier Clerc. The book is called The Gift of Forgiveness, and it portrays a magical encounter that he had with Don Miguel Ruiz. And here, he asks the questions, how many times we have to pay for one mistake? And this is one thing that we have to think about. And he says that the answer is 1,000 times, because humans are the only animals on Earth who pay 1,000 times for the same mistake. Because every time we remember, we judge again, whether we are the perpetrator, or if you have received someone that had hurt you. We are going to bring those emotions alive again. We will be punishing the person. We will be punishing ourselves. And sometimes this happens a lot in the family relationship. Every time we bring, oh, but remember when you did that to me. So it is not fair. It is not fair to not only not to forgive, but especially to keep on bringing the same emotion every time. It's like you just have done that or have suffered that. So I think it's important for us to think about it, and how much we are, harming ourselves in this way. And there are so many scientific studies, because today forgiveness is no longer just a matter of a religious, spiritual thinking. It's what they do in psychology, in the medical field, and so they can see the efficacy of in terms of general health and emotional balance of people who were holding on to grudges before, and now they are ridding themselves of this. So we have Dr. Deepak Chopra, for instance, that talks a lot about the forgiveness as a personal healing, a powerful tool for personal healing and spiritual transformation. He has books that talks about his practicing his steps, because as everything in our lives, we just don't change overnight, and we need help. But of course, the first thing that we have to do is to have an open mind, at least just to search for, materials that can inspire us in going in this track. And I think that it's very meaningful, Joanna de Angelis putting this chapter on this book, Wake Up and Be Happy, right? It's not just a simple title and all the chapters that we have here, but this is like, pay attention to what you're doing to you. You really wanted to be happy. You really want to be in peace. So it's time to wake up. It's time to, be mindful of what you are thinking, of, those uncontrolled emotions that we have, right? And so it's really an invitation to awakening.
I love it. I love it. One thing that I was going to ask you, Jussara, maybe you can speak to it about it, but what does it take in general to be able to forgive? You mentioned understanding. Are there other steps for really becoming able to forgive that the other person?
Mhm. Well, we have here from Dr. Worthington. He is a PhD professor of psychology at the
Mhm.
Virginia Commonwealth University. That he has several actually books written in relation to this topic, and one of them is 5 steps to forgiveness, and he calls those 5 steps the rich process, because he uses the REACH words as the beginning of the explanation for the steps, that it's just one way of doing it. So one thing that he starts by saying, recall the hurt. Okay, we have to think and to be clear, to have it clear in our mind what happened, right? Then is when, once we recall the hurt, exactly what happened, we are going to put ourselves in a position of empathizing with the one that has hurt us. Is when we start thinking, why did this person behave like this in relation to me? Um, was just out of nowhere, or maybe the person was going through a very difficult ordeal, or maybe the person is not in an enlightened position, or like you said, Marcia, when you were talking about the children, we are the adults. Spiritually speaking, this person still do not have this possibility. Then he comes to the third point, which is altruistic gift, which means offer the altruistic gift of forgiveness. Because when we start reasoning about that, recalling the hurt, empathizing, we can go to this third step thinking, why can I not be the bigger persons in this case? Or why can I not, um, you know, forgive this person just out of goodness, just out of altruistic behavior? But then we can reach this point, but the fourth step is kind of hard, because we have to commit to that. It's just not enough for us to go through the process of reasoning, to the process of empathizing, and the process of saying, "Oh, I'm going to be, the better one in this case. I'm not going to think about it anymore." We have to commit, and then the fifth step, which is kind of similar, he says you have to hold on to that. So there has to be a commitment, and we have to keep on, holding on this commitment, all those steps. Of course, it's going to require from us an emotional charge of energy, because it's not easy. We will have to deal with our ego. But every time we can tame our ego, it could be an exercise. This could be an exercise. There are sometimes so little things that we hold grudges. It starts with the little things. It starts with the least important ones. Don't go to the extremes without first practicing a little bit. And I think that once we do that, we will see how much more liberated we are, and we are going to be giving, room for the self to appear, right?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the words that resonate to with me from you, Jussara, are awareness or understanding that the process of having the courage to recall, right? Recall the actual hurt, and as difficult as it is, just that step, but moving to, now I have to commit, I have to empathize, I have to understand, and I have to hold on, because it's easy to go back,
Mm.
right? I have to tell you, I was out a couple of weeks ago, out of the country, and oh my goodness, I had an audience with somebody who witnessed a great hurt that I went through. And Jussara, I swear, I thought I had overcome, I thought I had forgiven, and I thought I had forgotten. Okay, so this is one. The other person was somebody, an innocent person that didn't know anyone involved. So she was just curious. Tell me this narrative, this story. And then a third person who was a bystander to the whole process. And that's the glitch because I'm there and I'm talking. And of course, my ego is inflated. I was hurt. And I just go on in the best storytelling possible manner. And I'm just, really talking about the victimization that I was going, and I was able to overcome. And the other bystander goes in and she says, actually, you really did not do that because blah, 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 blah. And if it were me, I would have done da, 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 and it would completely stop this whole story. And all of it came back alive. I started to cry. I started to just go relive, like you mentioned, that moment of hurt all over again. And I know it is all about my ego that was hurt. And I was put in a position to have to be the bigger person. It took me years and forgive and forget, but I hadn't really forgotten. It was clearly available just 2 weeks ago. So today's conversation is awesome because I can tell you with my own experience, even when we believe we have overcome, we need to go back and recall, like you said, and be committed and hold on to our decision to forgive and forget.
Yeah, and the idea here, like we said before, according to the teaching of Jesus, love your enemies, it doesn't mean to make them, necessarily your best friend. It can happen, but not necessarily that. It will require a process until there is trust in each other. So we are not oblivious to that. But it's interesting because Joanna de Angelis says here, to forget unfortunate events is a valuable victory of the spirit over itself, overcoming the low order impositions of the ego and enabling the development of higher aptitudes inherent to all human beings. So again, she's talking exactly what you were saying, right? I mean, when we are going through this process, we are really overcoming, like she says here, the impositions of the ego. So whenever we are capable of doing that, we are giving room for a better self to rise, right? So this is, I think, is very important in all of this topic because when we are talking here, like this harmony, this mental balance, it has everything to do with this process and the worth. Not the worst, but a bad thing that we do as well. And of course, in other episodes, we can talk more about guilt. For instance, I think we already did one of those, but we can go back there. Is the process of self-forgiveness as well. When I'm not open to forgiving others, in many cases, we are not open to forgive ourselves as well. It's like on the back of our minds, we say, if I forgive that person, I have to forgive myself as well because of a similar behavior. but we are not ready to move on, because sometimes we like to be, or our ego wants to maintain us in this victimized position. So there is an enormous gain in trying to practice the forgiveness in relation to others, especially when we are thinking about ourselves. So when Dr. Worthington, for instance, talks about the second step, empathize, right? It's the same thing that we have to do with ourselves. So when we are thinking about our errors, right, or wrongdoings, or bad choices, we will have to go through stages as well. First is coming guilt, then remorse, then repentance, then self-acceptance, and then a renewed behavior. Because again, it's not advisable for us just to stay on the awareness, right? When we are aware that something is not good, that certain behaviors should not be repeated, then we have to be active, right? And, have a commitment, hold on to this commitment of not doing the same things again. So I every time I think about this topic, it gives me great relief, because it's not that I'm going to be happy because other people are not perfect, but it's a relief to know that I myself are in the same category, right? I want to be better. I'm trying to be better, but I'm still not perfect. And of course, there will be, misguided actions and all of this that we are going to do. And sometimes even in our ways of not paying attention. Even yesterday, I was watching an episode on the TV of one of the series that I like to watch, and they were talking about a man that talked to his colleagues that he was gay, and he had been held this information for quite a long time, and then the employer being part of that conversation, and all the others saying, I don't care, we don't care. Why did you, think that you had to hold this information for so long? And then the employee said, no, we don't have to say, I don't care. We have to say, I care. I care for everything that you're going through. I care because, you have to hold up on this information thinking that we are going to be judged. I care because, I want to be there and to give you support in each and every step of your way. So I like that so much, because it's not a matter of I don't care. It's a matter of caring for others and caring for ourselves.
Well, Jussara, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know the series, I know the episode, and I have to tell you, throughout this conversation, I thought about a different episode, and I'm going to try to, because I haven't formulated my mind, but let me try to convey to you what is quite impactful, right? So the story goes that this man was wronged by his dad. His dad abandoned him. His dad antagonized him. His dad publicly humiliated him throughout. He's an adult, and he learned to live life despite his dad. So the anger, which is one of the basic emotions, right? The anger toward being hurt and being a victim of who should be somebody to protect him was actually fueling him to be everything that he was today in terms of success.
Mhm.
Well, long story goes, he's going through in the series a process of inner transformation and forgiveness. It's really interesting, right? And at the critical moment where he needed to prove all his goodness in terms of how he executes upon material life,
Uh-huh.
he lost. He lost because he forgave. He had nothing, and he had this emptiness, and it's very compelling, the story. How
Mhm.
do you deal with that when perhaps a thirst for, and I'm not talking about this character, but for us, if we are living a life where revenge or anger or that conflict that may be buried inside of you may be very aware. And once we go through what we need to go through, Dr. Worthington, thank you. I'm going to use the reach process to become better. And then you face yourself with the notion of emptiness. And I have to tell you, Jussara, without spoiling when you watch that episode, the fact that within a critical moment, minutes tick, the clock ticking, and he needs to do something. This young man is confronted with the notion that he has somehow forgotten, but not truly forgiven. So it's the flip of what we're saying here. And then he says, go right now and forgive him. And in the moment that he is able to, this is of course fiction, right? The moment that he's forgiven mentally his dad, it's almost like the world opens up, and the energy, because you mentioned that
Mhm.
before, Jussara, the energy that he needed to really trigger all his potentiality just flowed, and he was able to be the best of he was, that previously was fueled by anger, but now was fueled by love. So it's just a very beautiful, almost a mythological way of talking about forgiving and forgetting, right? And I'm glad that we're watching the same series together.
It, it's interesting because, of course, even when we are talking about the TV, uh, there are always different levels of watching a show, right?
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
I do like that. I always try to watch it, thinking about the human beings, the
Mhm.
behaviors,
Yeah, yeah,
and we know that there is no story that hasn't happened in real life, and there are
yeah,
so
yeah.
many more that has
True.
happened. But I just would like to emphasize how um, incredible is this work of Dr. Worthington, because he starts exactly with what we were saying: recall the hurt.
Yeah,
So if we just try to bear it within us, thinking that, oh, I have dealt with that, uh,
hmm,
right? Uh, we don't go through the other processes, and later on it is going to appear, and sometimes it's going to appear in a critical moment of your life when you
yes.
really need to be in balance and full control, and then all of a sudden everything comes to surface.
Yeah, so I'd like to add here, just that I know we're coming to an end of our today's conversation, but it's really key what you just said. Number one, this is getting hurt is mostly a product of our egos being hurt. The image that we create to meet the demands of the world, and we create with a lot of effort, and we maintain with a lot of effort. right? So when that image, a projection of ourselves, our psyche, is in danger, is threatened, then you get hurt. So what happens? Our mechanism of defenses start to formulate, and they're there to protect our ego. They're there to protect this image, right? Let's defend and this structure of my conscious. But one of the things that you just mentioned, which is the mechanism of repression, repressing whatever that is, right, to bury it in an unconscious, will, if not addressed, will surface. It will surface in the form of emotional or psychological, mental diseases, or physical, as it's somatized in our bodies. So I think the big message from my perspective of our conversation today is, let's be brave, right? It's not for the weak of heart, right? Let's be brave and face everything that has happened to our lives. As we go through, maybe we can create a mechanism for recalls, or for reflecting, or for meditating upon a period of your time, or relationships, etc. And let's be brave enough to see, how did I feel? How did I react? What was this conflict really threatening? Is it someone? Is it my ego? Is it a position? Is it a belief, etc., etc.? So I think this is really an amazing opportunity for us to perhaps read, wake up and be happy. Read the book, and I forgot the title already, but by Dr. Worthington. And let's see if next time we talk about this topic, you are here with us, watching us again, and you're able to perhaps give us some feedback on how you are dealing with this topic yourself. Jussara, before we close, do you have any final comments?
Well, the name of the book is Five Steps to Forgiveness.
Thank
And
you.
I think you summarize it so well, Marcia, because uh, we have to be brave, and the first step has to be acknowledging that we still have this emotional burden within ourselves. So it's like, make an intervention in yourself, and acknowledge that you have a problem with one person, with a situation, because this is the only way that, when we go face to face with the problem, that we can actually deal with that. And it's not with a name just to bring all the the emotions back to surface again. Start rethinking about everything that happened, like you described it. Okay, you told your beautiful, not beautiful, but let's say your story, your side of your point of view in relation to that. And but really to be able to acknowledging that, yeah, we do have that, and we are in the process of self-healing. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. All right, everyone. We have come to the end of our discussion today. I hope I can see you next week when we meet again to discuss psychology and spirituality. Thank you, Jussara, for being here with me. Thank you, all of you who were able to join us via this channel. And I look forward to continue this conversation, Jussara. Bye-bye.